Have you ever felt like your emotions are hijacking your life? Do you struggle to stay calm when the world around you spins into chaos? What if I told you that the ancient Stoics had a blueprint, not for suppressing emotion, but for mastering it with wisdom and control? Welcome to the channel. If you're seeking mental clarity, resilience, and the kind of emotional strength that doesn't rely on the outside world, you're in the right place. Subscribe now, because your transformation starts with knowledge, and knowledge begins here. 1. The Stoic shift, where true power begins. At the heart of Stoicism lies a revolutionary idea. It's not the world that disturbs us, but our thoughts about it. This isn't just philosophy, it's a shift in how we relate to reality itself. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, first articulated this in a way that cut through centuries of emotional chaos. Events don't disturb us, our interpretations do. This idea turns power inward. It reclaims agency from the external world and returns it to the only place we ever truly possess influence, our own minds. In a world addicted to reaction and overstimulation, where people often hand over their emotional thermostat to headlines, traffic jams, social media comments, or the moods of others, Stoicism offers a radical antidote. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" the Stoic mind asks, "What am I making this mean?" That question alone turns a victim into a sovereign. When Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor burdened by war and loss, wrote that our minds have the power to remain unmoved amidst chaos, he wasn't escaping from the world, he was choosing how to meet it. This distinction is critical. Stoicism isn't about becoming numb or indifferent. It's about becoming invulnerable to being enslaved by things beyond your control. Marcus's empire was crumbling at the edges. He dealt with betrayal, plague, rebellion, and the death of loved ones. Yet in his meditations, he repeated to himself, not others, affirmations of inner resilience. Why? Because even with all the military might of Rome, he understood that the true battlefield was internal. Real strength isn't seen in domination over others, but in mastery over one's own thoughts and passions. To be unmoved is not to be unfeeling, it is to feel everything, yet choose to remain guided by wisdom rather than overwhelmed by emotion. Stoicism teaches us to draw a bold line between two categories, what we can control and what we can't. Our judgments, choices, and values, that's within our domain. The opinions of others, the randomness of fate or sudden misfortune, that's beyond it. This dichotomy of control, so simple and yet so profound, becomes a compass for navigating life. Most of our suffering doesn't come from events themselves, but from our refusal to accept their uncontrollability. When we confuse influence with control, we become prisoners of expectation. But when we truly internalize what is ours to command, our thoughts, our actions, our integrity, we become unshakable. Life becomes less about managing outcomes and more about mastering responses. This distinction is not only liberating, it's empowering. Because once you stop trying to command the uncontrollable, your energy shifts toward what truly matters, your internal state, your response, your virtue. You stop arguing with reality. You stop negotiating with fate. Instead, you focus on being courageous, wise, just, and disciplined. In that focus, you tap into a deeper form of power, the kind that cannot be taken from you, no matter how much is taken from your circumstances. You become a fortress with a mind for walls and virtue for guards. This is the Stoic shift. And for many, it's not just the beginning of wisdom, it's the beginning of freedom. 2. Techniques for tempering the mind. Philosophy becomes power when it turns into practice. The Stoics didn't just preach emotional discipline, they lived it through techniques we can adopt today. For them, Stoicism wasn't a series of lofty ideas to be debated in lecture halls. It was a survival manual, a daily training regimen for the mind. Seneca wrote letters not to impress but to sharpen his soul. Epictetus taught his students to rehearse insults and hardship like an athlete practices drills. These weren't abstract musings. They were mental calluses forged through reflection, repetition, and reasoned restraint. The Stoics knew that the mind, left untrained, becomes a puppet of circumstance. But with practice, it can be forged into a sword of clarity, capable of slicing through chaos and fear. First, there's cognitive reframing. Imagine treating every challenge not as a threat, but as a neutral event, something you assign meaning to, not something that defines you. This is how you take back control from your knee-jerk reactions. Reframing teaches us that every obstacle contains the seed of an opportunity, if only we're willing to shift our lens. The Stoics called this turning the obstacle into the path. If someone insults you, it's not an attack, it's a test of your humility. If plans fall apart, it's not failure, it's a redirection toward a different form of growth. By controlling our narrative, we regain authorship of our lives. We stop being passive recipients of meaning and become the storytellers of our experience. Next is premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It may sound grim, but it's remarkably strengthening. You mentally prepare for setbacks before they happen. That way, when they arrive, you're not shocked, you're composed. Picture yourself losing your job, falling ill, being betrayed. Not to invite doom, but to inoculate your soul against it. When adversity arrives, you'll recognize it as something you've already met in the theater of your mind. You'll face it not with panic, but with poise. This method builds what the Stoics prized most: emotional anti-fragility. You become less like a vase which shatters when dropped and more like a muscle, growing stronger from stress. Then there's the most accessible yet powerful method, the momentary pause. When something triggers you, don't react immediately. Insert a pause. Breathe. Reflect. This short space becomes the ground where reason reclaims authority over impulse. You might feel anger, fear, jealousy. But between that feeling and your response lies a sacred window. In that window, you can choose. That choice is freedom. Over time, the pause becomes a habit, and the habit becomes your character. What once provoked you becomes an opportunity for mastery. The Stoics practiced this pause constantly, counting to themselves, reminding themselves of nature's laws, or simply saying, "Is this in my control?" That second of stillness has prevented countless wars, both inner and outer. Modern psychology echoes these exact methods. Reframing, it's used in cognitive behavioral therapy. Visualization, a staple in performance psychology. The pause, central to mindfulness. The Stoics were centuries ahead. They didn't need labs to confirm what they lived, that the mind, like the body, can be trained. The world may give you little control, but it gives you a mind, and with the right techniques, that's more than enough. 3. Marcus Aurelius and the philosophy of fortitude. Marcus Aurelius didn't write for an audience. His journal, Meditations, was a private exercise in survival, and through it, we glimpse a mind determined to stay grounded regardless of fortune. Imagine the most powerful man in the known world, leading armies, facing plague, burying children, yet in the quiet hours, scribbling reminders to himself not to be arrogant, not to rage, not to give in to despair. His writings weren't performances. They were confessions, confessions of a man at war with his own impulses, trying daily to live up to a philosophy that demanded everything and promised only virtue in return. In that vulnerability lies his greatness, not as a ruler of Rome, but as a ruler of self. Wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events, Realize this, and you will find strength. These words weren't meant to sound poetic. They were his psychological armor. In them, we see the essence of Stoic resilience. Don't chase. Control over the uncontrollable. Don't build castles on sand. Root your strength in your ability to choose your mindset, your actions, and your values, even when all else crumbles. Marcus didn't pretend to be above pain, but he refused to let pain dictate who he became. He understood what modern psychology now affirms: our interpretation of events, not the events themselves, determines our emotional fate. His inner voice became his fortress. Every entry in Meditations was a brick in that fortress. His reflections weren't about suppressing feeling, but about staying upright in emotional storms. In this, we see a Stoic prototype for emotional regulation, a guide that recognizes thoughts as mediators between events and reactions. Marcus spoke of anger, grief, ambition, and weariness, not as sins, but as hurdles to be approached with reason and perspective. He believed in observing emotions, questioning them, and choosing whether to act on them. This practice mirrors today's emotional intelligence models. Recognize the feeling, understand its origin, and respond with clarity rather than reflex. He didn't aim to be emotionless. He aimed to be virtuous through emotion. This philosophy became a silent companion for centuries of thinkers and soldiers alike. And today, it still speaks to anyone aiming to live with clarity instead of chaos. From CEOs managing high-stakes decisions to soldiers on the battlefield, from therapists guiding clients through trauma to teenagers navigating social anxiety, Marcus Aurelius remains a beacon. Not because he was perfect, but because he was honest. His words remind us that leadership begins within, that calm isn't the absence of emotion, it's the command of it, and that in a world ruled by distraction, his simple entries, written in fading ink on worn scrolls, still hold the blueprint for fortitude. 4. Bridging philosophy and modern psychology. Stoicism isn't just relevant, it's research-worthy. In fact, it mirrors what today's psychologists call emotion regulation. While some see ancient philosophy as detached from empirical science, Stoicism anticipated many concepts now validated by psychology. It's a toolkit that teaches us how to respond, rather than react, to the chaos of life. The Stoics didn't suppress emotion, they sought to understand and guide it. This mirrors modern psychological approaches that emphasize awareness, self-regulation, and constructive thought patterns. Ancient philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius provided insights on human behavior that align remarkably with principles used in therapy rooms today. They didn't have fMRI machines or academic journals, but they had lived experience, reflection, and a relentless drive to understand the mind. Take reframing. It's identical to cognitive restructuring, a key component of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, used to manage anxiety and depression. When Epictetus advised that it's not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them, he echoed the core of CBT, the idea that our interpretation, not the event itself, determines our emotional response. Cognitive restructuring asks us to identify irrational thoughts and replace them with more rational alternatives. The Stoic practice of reflecting on what is within our control and what is not serves a similar function. It interrupts the loop of negative self-talk and offers a grounded alternative. Stoicism, then, is not just philosophical musing. It's an early form of mental hygiene. Even the exercises the Stoics practiced, like journaling, negative visualization, or daily reflection, are nearly identical to the tools therapists use today. Premeditatio malorum? That's akin to exposure therapy, where imagining feared outcomes helps reduce their impact. This technique, where one contemplates the worst-case scenario to build emotional resilience, is a staple in treating phobias and PTSD. Modern exposure therapy helps patients desensitize themselves to fear by visualizing and slowly confronting what they dread. Stoics didn't wait for disaster to practice composure. They pre-rehearsed adversity. Seneca advised contemplating poverty, exile, and death so they would not shock the system when they arrived. It's not pessimism, it's psychological immunity. Both Stoicism and modern therapy understand that when fear is faced, it loses its grip. And when we repeatedly visualize and mentally rehearse challenges, we train the brain to respond with strength rather than panic. The pause between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychologist, later coined this same idea as the birthplace of freedom. Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power, to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." This idea is Stoicism distilled. Marcus Aurelius, centuries earlier, wrote that we are disturbed not by events, but by our judgments about them. The Stoic concept of prohairesis, the ability to choose one's internal response regardless of external events, is mirrored in Frankl's existential psychology. That sacred pause, where we decide how to act instead of being driven by impulse, is where philosophy and psychology meet. Researchers can learn from Stoicism, not just to validate it, but to integrate it. What happens when participants practice Stoic techniques daily? Does stress decrease? Does self-control rise? These aren't just questions for the academy, they're invitations for deeper exploration. The Stoic emphasis on journaling, reflection, and virtuous action could be quantified, tested, and applied across therapeutic settings. Early pilot studies have already shown promise. Participants who engage in Stoic meditations or negative visualization report higher resilience and decreased anxiety. But the field is still ripe for innovation. Psychology can borrow from Stoicism's structured practices while offering scientific rigor and adaptation. Together, they form a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern healing. Stoicism was never anti-emotion, it was pro-reason. And in that, it becomes a powerful, empirical tool for the modern mind. Emotions were not to be ignored or repressed, but understood, evaluated, and disciplined through logic and self-awareness. The Stoics argued that by mastering reason, we could achieve ataraxia, inner peace, without eliminating our humanity. Today, emotional intelligence teaches something similar: awareness of emotions, empathy, regulation, and intentionality. The modern mind, overwhelmed by stimuli and expectations, craves exactly what Stoicism offers: clarity, calm, and a compass, rooted in virtue. In combining ancient insight with scientific validation, we don't just revive Stoicism, we future-proof it. 5. Apply the wisdom, live the change. This isn't abstract theory, it's a daily discipline. If you want to embody Stoic resilience, anchor your life in these 4 principles. Control what you can, reframe your interpretations, expect setbacks, and insert the response gap. Stoicism isn't a philosophy you read once and shelve. It's a lived practice. And like any discipline, it strengthens with use. Each day presents an opportunity to train your character, sharpen your focus, and respond with virtue. The Stoics weren't armchair philosophers. They were emperors, slaves, generals, and citizens who tested these ideas under pressure. Your life is the training ground. Whether you're navigating a breakup, a failed project, or a frustrating commute, Stoic tools are ready, but you have to reach for them, not in crisis, but daily. Shall control what you can. You don't control outcomes. You control your effort, mindset, and choices. Own them fully. This first principle is the foundation of peace. When you surrender your mental energy to things beyond your influence, other people's opinions, the past, the weather, you hemorrhage power. But when you narrow your focus to What you can influence, your attitude, your discipline, your preparation, you reclaim control. The serenity prayer echoes this. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Stoicism lived out means obsessing not over the result, but over your input. You may not win every battle, but you can always choose how you fight. 2. Interpret, don't react. Emotions flare when we assume danger or offense. Reframe the story, change the reaction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be." What he meant is that interpretation is the birthplace of suffering. When someone insults you, the pain isn't in their words, it's in your interpretation of them. Choose a different frame, and the insult becomes irrelevant. Modern psychology teaches that by shifting the narrative, we change our emotional trajectory. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Instead of reacting with rage, consider that they might be rushing to the hospital. This isn't about excusing bad behavior, it's about protecting your peace. The power is in your perspective. T. Prepare for setbacks. Expect difficulty. Visualize obstacles. You'll meet them with readiness, not ruin. The Stoic doesn't hope for a smooth path. They prepare for storms. This practice, called premeditatio malorum, is about rehearsing adversity so you're not undone by it. Instead of being surprised by betrayal, illness, or delay, you anticipate them, not with dread, but with strategy. Think of an athlete visualizing a hard opponent before the match, or a pilot running emergency protocols in a simulator. Life is full of turbulence. The Stoic doesn't deny this, they train for it. That way, when the crisis arrives, they're calm, not because it's easy, but because they're ready. Insert the response gap. That pause, it's sacred. In it lies the power to choose virtue over vengeance, patience over panic. Between the trigger and your response, there's a space. It might be a second, a breath, or a heartbeat. But in that pause is your entire freedom. Most people react, impulsively, emotionally, and often destructively. But Stoicism teaches you to pause, assess, and respond deliberately. Someone insults you, breathe. Your partner disappoints you, pause. That space gives you clarity, and from clarity comes control. The greatest power isn't reacting quickly, it's choosing wisely. The Stoic builds this pause into their nervous system through reflection, journaling, and practice. Master these, and life may not become easier, but you'll become unshakable. Storms will still come, relationships will still falter, and ambitions may still be delayed. But you will move through life not as a leaf in the wind, but as a rooted tree. The goal is not invulnerability, it's virtue. A life led by intention, not reaction. A spirit anchored in purpose, not tossed by panic. When you live these principles daily, Stoicism ceases to be a theory. It becomes your way of being. And the world, chaotic as it is, becomes a stage for your excellence. The Stoics didn't promise a life without pain. They promised a life with purpose. They didn't seek to erase emotion, but to guide it with reason. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, reactive, or lost in chaos, let this be your turning point. You have the tools, you have the wisdom, now use them. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs inner strength today. The Stoic path isn't lonely, it's a legacy. Walk it well,